and it's the biography of Professor Michael Cousins, who's the father of pain medicine in Australia. Michael grew up in Sydney in the 1940s. He studied medicine at Sydney Uni, and he trained as an anaesthetist at Royal North Shore Hospital. In 1990, he set up Royal North Shore Hospital's Pain Medicine Centre, and he led it to international acclaim until his retirement three decades later. On Cracker Night in 1964, when he was a junior doctor, Michael treated two little boys whose bonfire had run rampant, leaving them with life-threatening burns. He kept a 48-hour vigil by the boys' bedsides, fighting to save their lives. Thankfully, the boys survived, but Michael couldn't control their agonizing pain because pain medicine was poorly understood and there were few options for managing severe pain back then. Haunted by the children's suffering, he resolved to learn more about pain and its management. At the end of that weekend, Michael made a decision that would define his future and profoundly influence the field of pain medicine. He dedicated his life to reducing suffering by improving the treatment of pain. Writing Michael's biography involved countless choices about narrative strategy, and today I'll explore some of them with you. Each choice involved one or more questions, and by viewing them as a whole, I formed a research question for my PhD in biography. How does one write the biography of a living scientist? Richard Holmes, who wrote the biography of scientists from the Romantic Age of Science, suggests today's readers want to read about scientific work as part of a life story, and that biographies of scientists can be suspenseful and electrifying, a detective story perhaps, a mystery story, but always a story of human lives. Holmes encourages biographers to bring the story of a scientist or doctor to life by sharing with readers what makes the person tick and what sets them ticking. Also vital is capturing scientific passion, the essence of wonder and centrality in the essence of wonder and its centrality in the life of a researcher, because it's what drives so much scientific endeavour. Readers of science biographies long to experience adventures of the human spirit that shows what drives scientists to make discoveries, also how they deal with uncertainty, dead ends, and mistakes. Contemporary readers are also curious about psychological and social interpretations of scientists' lives and non-scientific aspects such as love, religion, and politics. This is the approach I took in breaking through the pain barrier. It involved a process of trial and error and involved a myriad of choices about structure, narrative voice, point of view, language, rhythm, interpretation, just to name a few. It also involved deciding which quotes, anecdotes, revelatory incidents, conversations, and descriptions to include. Other vital decisions were how to frame the biography, the questions I sought to answer, and how I wanted readers to experience the book. Today's biographers have considerable freedom about how they structure the narrative, and I spent months trialing various approaches. Some of the key choices were whether to paint a traditional cradle-to-grave portrait that followed the ticking of the clock, whether to begin at the end and work backwards, or whether to structure the narrative by themes. At its core, breaking through the pain barrier is a hero's quest, and my task was to get Michael from the beginning of his quest to a significant endpoint, despite the villains, which in his case included political and professional inertia, the attempts of opponents to thwart his efforts, and to continual lack of funding for pain services and research. After many, many months of experimentation, I decided to start with a prologue that described the inciting incident, which was Michael's inability to control the pain of the two burned boys. Then I progressed chronologically, structuring the narrative around pivotal moments and turning points in his journey. Rather than including chapters on his childhood, I used backstory to show how his childhood and upbringing influenced him. One of my goals was to help readers feel Michael's passion for pain medicine and experience his struggles, eureka moments, and disappointments. But to my horror, members of my writing group said all they could feel was boredom because the draft manuscript read like an encyclopedia. They suggested I find my narrative voice rather than writing in Michael's academic voice. While I had a vague understanding of narrative voice, I couldn't grasp its essence in a practical sense or how to change it. Hoping they could guide me, I turned to the writing community for inspiration. Over several months, I read a mountain of biographies and books about the art and craft of biography, and I spoke with biographers around the world. I also reread the books of authors with a distinctive voice, such as Helen Garner, Virginia Woolf, and Libby Strachey. While this taught me about narrative voice, I still wasn't sure how to rewrite the book and let mine shine through. I wondered whether reading the manuscript into an iPhone, recording it, then listening to it might help. So that's what I did. Starting on page 1, I read every paragraph into my iPhone, listened to it, then edited the text. After re-recording each paragraph, I reviewed it, then repeated the process until the manuscript reflected my voice rather than Michael's. Still, I knew a subject's vocabulary and speech patterns illuminate character, so I weaved the most revealing of Michael's remarks and the way he expressed himself into the narrative without it being overpowering. Something I learned from literary scholars was that biography, like fiction, reads on detail, but it's much more than simply reciting a succession of facts and dates, and involves adding little details, especially human detail, that allows you as a reader to enter the story. One way I tried to help readers get inside Michael's experiences was to borrow the novelist's tool of creating vivid scenes filled with sensory details, such as sounds, sights, and smells. I wanted readers to feel what he was feeling, particularly his desperation to improve pain management, despite the many obstacles littering his path. This involved manipulating the rhythm of sentences, paragraphs, and chapters to infuse them with a feeling of desperation and frustration. It also involved manipulating the pace at pivotal moments in the story. Pretending I was a filmmaker, I slowed the pace and created close-up shots, emphasizing words, events, and actions that had significance. This enabled me to create conflict, build suspense, and heighten dramatic moments, all the while intensifying the feeling of desperation. In recreating scenes from the past, I stuck to the facts because facts and truth are the bedrock of biography, and they differentiate it from fiction. Virginia Woolf said one condition imposed on biographers is their reliance on facts, facts that can be verified by other people, she wrote in an essay. However, Woolf insists a biographer's truth must be alive and on tiptoe, because the facts of a life are not static like the facts of science and change with the times. While gaps in the historical record call for biographers to use their imagination to reconstruct a life, the way they do this comes from an in-depth understanding of a life and the times, based on documentary evidence, a type of historical material found in archives and libraries. Still, some biographers suggest the act of writing biography is stalked by the temptation to embroider, to fill in the gaps with invention and orchestrate dramatic moments. This temptation to embroider was ever present for me because of the pandemic, which stopped me from walking in Michael's footsteps and immersing myself in the sights, sounds, smells, and vibes of important places in his life. COVID forced me to cancel my research trip in 2020 to North American universities, where Michael worked with the early pioneers of pain medicine. It also stopped me from researching extensive pain medicine archives at the University of California that are full of letters and minutes of meetings and other material that give a glimpse of the young Michael starting out in his career. It left me feeling frustrated I couldn't experience places that profoundly influenced his journey, and concerned I'd miss vital clues to better understand and portray him. This approach wasn't ideal, but now our international borders have reopened. I'm visiting Stanford, McGill, and Oxford universities next year, and will include my insights into the reworked version of the biography I'm submitting for my doctorate. In closing, settling on a narrative strategy for breaking through the pain barrier involves countless choices and much experimentation, followed by analysis of the outcome of making each choice and reworking the narrative when necessary. My key learning from this process is it's okay to try and approach, assess its impact, finesse it, or replace it with an alternative option. I took comfort from Virginia Woolf's admission that one of her letters to the Times went through 27 drafts. So did Kate Granville's biography of her mother, Nance Russell. As I end, I want to reassure budding biographers that while these choices might seem overwhelming at first, the process of making them is tremendously exciting. Writing a biography is a privilege and enables the biographer and reader to better understand themselves and the human condition. It's also exhilarating, especially when you uncover the missing gold nuggets that unlock the meaning of a life. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yeah. Well, look, it's very tempting to embroider because what you're doing is imagining scenes, but you're imagining scenes from a whole range of materials, archival material, letters, and minutes of meetings, and diary entries, journal entries. So what you've got to do is take all the materials at hand, plus your knowledge of the person through, if it's a living subject, interviewing them and sitting with them for hours and hours and days and week to week. And also from the comments of all the other people you interview, because I interviewed over 100 people apart from Michael and Michelle and his family. So you get a feel for a person. So it does help you. I suppose it's a sort of embellishing, but what you're doing is taking the fact and just making it interesting and engaging for the reader. Because at the end of the day, you've got to write a gripping story that keeps people turning the pages. So you have to write creatively, but stick to the facts. I was just going to say, as you write, you show Michael what you're writing, or did you sort of wait till the end? But what I did with Michael was I needed him to verify the medical facts and the historical facts. Yeah. And so he was very involved in correcting my mistakes where I hadn't explained, because what I'm trying to do is take medical research and complex medical terminology and concepts and make it readable and interesting and captivating for my reader. So in doing that, I didn't want to dumb down what I was writing, but I had to maintain its historical and scientific integrity. So, did you do that all in one piece, or we did it in stages? Yeah, yeah. And then what I also did was I had other pain medicine specialists who were involved in the research projects Michael was in. I had them verify as well what happened. So I reimagined some of the experiments they did with patients, and there were usually a few different people involved in the room. And so I got their version of the experiments that they were doing so that I could piece it all together, because different people remember different aspects of it. And so it's very much like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. Yeah, so I published so I wrote the book during the pandemic. During the pandemic, Michael was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I wanted to publish it while he could still read it, because now he wouldn't be able to read it. So despite I had to cancel my research trip to the archives and even to Flinders University and Royal North Shore Hospital, their archives were going to, they were put all into a room right up to the ceiling. So it's only now I'm doing the archival research, and I'm rewriting the book to incorporate all the archival research. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it is. No, it's all. I mean, I have been through ethics training. Look, the whole thing has been part of my PhD. So that book is the creative component of my PhD. But what I submit to the examiners is the reworked version with all the archival material. So the things I'm really looking for are letters between people and letters between people and Michael. They give me a sense of what it was like as a young person. And so I've been spending the last few weeks in the Royal North Shore Hospital archives, and I've actually changed my view on him as a young person because of all the letters that I've read between him and all these other people. Possibly, my PhD supervisors want me to. So we'll just see how it goes. Yeah.